Hello everyone, I'm Chipped Tunes, and today we'll be talking about the process of writing an adventure theme. So, how do you write a piece of music that captures a feeling of adventure? How do you inspire people to press onward against sometimes impossible odds? Well, I probably can't go as far as telling you that, but if you want to learn how to write something exciting that might fit in a Zelda game from the 1980s, you're in the right place. Right off the bat, I can tell you I pulled heavily from a few different iconic pieces of video game music when I wrote my original piece. Those are the Dark World theme from The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, and the Route 10 theme from Pokemon Black and White. And although it wasn't consciously in my mind while composing, now that I look back, I can definitely see the influence of another Legend of Zelda tune, The Wind Waker's Dragon Roost Island. Those are by far the biggest inspirations for my original song, The Road North, which you should definitely check out here. Now, let's break down what makes these songs, as well as mine, exciting, driving the listener to continue their journey through fantastical lands. Let's take the Dark World theme first. You start with a low brass opening and a steady snare beat, giving it a martial feel. Think of the beginning of John Williams' The Imperial March, or any of John Philip Sousa's marches. You have the strings then come in with an ascending melody that, if you listen carefully, is not clearly in a major key or a minor key, and that's because it keeps switching back and forth. This is a topic I'll refer to a few times during this video, but the Dark World theme is a great introduction to it. Matt Kenyon has a neat video on some distinctive chord progressions in video game music, and this is rightfully included in his list. He mentions that this song is actually in the Dorian mode, also used quite a lot in jazz, which, if we're being pedantic about it, is not strictly major or minor. What we think of as the major and minor keys in a given scale are actually the Ionian and the Aeolian modes. Specifically, Aeolian mode is what we call natural minor, and we also have harmonic and melodic minor scales. Don't worry about it. Now, I would love to do a deeper dive on modal theory here, but for the sake of time and your sanity, I'll drop some links in the description of some useful resources if you'd like to learn more. What we're concerned about today is the Dorian mode is less stereotypically sad and dark than our typical minor scale.
In D minor, which I always find is really the saddest of all keys.
That makes it perfect for writing fantasy adventure music, since we're looking to give our heroes hope even in the darkest of circumstances. Another related topic that we'll see a lot in this genre of music is called modal mixture, borrowing keys from the parallel minor or major of the key that you're in. So, for example, if you're in C major, using an E-flat chord would be considered modal mixture since you're borrowing an E-flat from the parallel minor of C minor, since C major does not have E-flat anywhere in the key. You can hear this really clearly in Dark World, right when the melody starts. We're very firmly in C minor for most of the intro and the beginning of the melody, and then, bam! While the chord starting on F in a C minor scale would be the F minor, since A flat belongs in the C minor scale, we see here a very clear use of the F major chord, which propels the song in a direction we maybe weren't expecting, a brighter one. Let's take a quick look at Dragon Roost Island next. 8-Bit Music Theory has already done an incredible video on this, so check out the link below if you're curious for more. But one thing he mentioned that I want to hone in on in this piece is the idea of a softer minor.
The tune starts off with a G minor to F major vamp, the quickest and easiest way to evoke the soft minor sound I'm talking about.
Hey, remember that modal mixture thing we were just talking about 10 seconds ago? That's exactly what this is. Starting in a minor key and then borrowing major chords is what keeps this style of music hopeful, exciting, and unpredictable. All excellent characteristics of adventure music. The Dorian mode helps with that, since including the major 6 in the scale instead of the minor gives you more major options to choose from. Now, did I use any of this in my song? Any at all? No. So why on earth am I talking about this? Understanding how I wrote this month's song, The Road North, which you can watch right up here, go right up here, go watch it right up here, requires us to look at the other main piece I listed as inspiration, Route 10 from Pokemon Black and White. Now, it may sound a little familiar. So yeah, I may have stolen like an artist a little too well with this one. They're even in the same key. But Route 10 is my favorite song in the Pokemon franchise, and for good reason. I think it captures the feeling of almost reaching the end of a long journey. You know that you just have a little farther to go, and the end will be worth it. It has a pretty strong Spanish feel to it, with the inclusion of castanets, accordion, and guitar. And the rhythm is actually pretty typical of what you'd expect from stereotypically Spanish-sounding music. Compare this with the opening of the Broadway show Man of La Mancha, which takes place in Renaissance-era Spain. So, what makes Route 10, and by extension my original song, which you can watch up here, even work as an adventure theme if it doesn't use modal mixture? A few things. The rhythm here is absolutely essential. You've probably heard me talk a lot about syncopation at this point, and if you haven't, you can go watch my video from last month, right up here. But syncopation, or emphasizing the weaker beats in a measure, is an integral technique for generating any kind of momentum or forward movement in your music. You can hear that in the brass line for Dark World, in the bass and percussion lines for Route 10, and in the low strings of Skyward Sword's opening theme, and Twilight Princess's Hyrule Field theme. It's also something I rely on throughout my entire original piece. You might notice how the left hand of the piano changes notes, but the rhythm remains constant. And yes, it is the same rhythm you see in Route 10, please just leave me alone, I really like Pokemon music. Some other notable features of my song include a 7-bar phrase for the main melody, which lasts for the first half of the song. This is rather atypical, as most Western music will use 4, 8, or 16 bars most commonly for their phrases. Leaving off that last measure gives the piece just a little bit of uncertainty and surprise, contributing to the feelings of excitement that I was hoping to evoke. This ends when I get to the second section of the piece, where I move instead to your more standard 8-bar phrase. I also move the piece into its relative major, from C minor to E flat major. Even though this is a full key change and not just borrowing a few chords, it still produces a similar effect to what I mentioned earlier with modal mixture and the Dorian mode. After spending so long in a darker sounding key, we give the listener a spot of hope when we transition to major. To get us back to minor for the repeat to the beginning meant I got to have some fun with layering in dissonance and figuring out the best resolution to get us back to C minor. I also included a little Easter egg. This little phrase came from me having a part of the Ori soundtrack stuck in my head, but honestly I still can't quite figure out which part. It sounds most like this, but if you have another idea, let me know. I'll briefly talk about the production process for the song, but to be honest, there wasn't a lot after writing everything in MuseScore. Well, except a complete restructuring of the melodic material, but, you know, small beans. I had originally considered making this a chiptune, or even a full melodic score, but all of my Dark World listening convinced me that this would sound best with SNES sound fonts. And of course, that all worked perfectly right out of the box. Yeah, so SNES sound fonts have their limitations. But people often say that limitations breed creativity, and sometimes even better results. This is definitely true here. Because the violin sounded so horrible up high, I experimented with some other sounds, and eventually realized that adding trumpet might be a good idea. Now, real quick, I've been throwing around the words fantasy adventure music a lot, but I've mainly been focusing on Nintendo music. What if you want to write adventure music that isn't optimized for a musical style that's at least 13 years out of date at this point? It would take another whole video to talk about adventure music and film scores, but to sum it up, you're gonna need brass. You'll need brass, and let me think about it. You're gonna need more. Brass instruments are your friend here. That's actually something I was forced to learn during the process of creating my song for this month. As I mentioned, the SNES sound font for string instruments was incredibly grating at higher pitches, and I found myself at a loss for what could carry the melody. The answer was, of course, a trumpet. And as I was filling in the texture around the melody, I found that the trumpet sounded just a little lonely. So I added a French horn to take over the harmony from the piano, which was just not going to cut it in this arrangement. Lastly, I added some harmonization for the horns, because you can never have too many horns. No, seriously, go listen to How to Train Your Dragon sometime. So if you're looking to compose truly epic and inspiring music that could fit in a cinema, as opposed to on a tiny sound chip, that's a good place to start. I'm sure John Williams wouldn't argue. But of course, these techniques will work for a tiny sound chip as well. There you have it, folks. That's how I went about writing an adventure theme for this month's original Chipped tune, which you can check out right here. If you liked this, or have any feedback on this video, please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. I really appreciate the kind words on my previous video, and I hope to keep improving these every month. So until then, stay tuned!